When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Throw the best birthday party ever that your child will always talk about. Big Air Trampoline Park inside Fieldhouse USA at the Polaris Mall can do just that. Award-winning birthday party packages start at just $300. And all birthday parties include pizza, drinks, a party room with a party host, grip socks, printed invitations, and all 40 attractions at Big Air Trampoline Park. It's a birthday party you and your kids will never forget. Book your party today. Big Air Columbus, where the fun never ends. Visit BigAirUSA.com/Columbus for details.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer, to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all four, when you get that message that says this content is not available in your location, a Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want, all those services, while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package, which is instantly downloadable to your device, and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Wednesday, it's the 24th of July. Hope you're all well and the rain is back. Joys to that. Inspired by the legend that is Mark Goldbridge at the suggestion of Eddie Gibbs, today we're going to play a little game of flop or not. And we're going to look at the big transfers from 22-23, 23-24 and see where teams stand with them now. Premier League only, obviously. We're going to go alphabetically. So we'll start with Arsenal. We're going to set a cutoff of 30 million. So only players signed for 30 million or more we're going to consider here. So Gabriel Jesus, Arsenal paid 45 million for him. I wouldn't say has been a flop, but you certainly couldn't say he's been a success. Many Arsenal fans would like him sold, but he did play very well in that first season. He has dealt with injuries, but he's never going to be a consistent goal scorer. So I don't think you can say hit, but you can't say flop either. So we'll put him down as a passive. Fabio Vieira, undeniably a flop at this point. Zinchenko's a funny one. He had a good first season, was overrated, of course, by the Arsenal fans. He had a bad second season. I would say he's about passive. Last summer, Arsenal spent 105 million on Declan Rice. It's certainly not worth anywhere close to the money, and to be a hit, you have to be worth the money. He's certainly not a flop, but I would say passive. Jurrien Timber will give a pass on because he hasn't played. Kai Havertz was bought to play in midfield and flopped in midfield. But he has done well up front. Now, he hasn't done £65 million well, but we'll have to say passive. So, for now, of the signings made from the last 2 summers for over 30 million, very hard to look at any of the Arsenal signings and say success. Certainly Vieira, flop. I would say the rest kind of all a push. Aston Villa up next, and Diego Carlos. Tore his Achilles, missed most of the first season. Thought he did pretty well last season, but hasn't lived up to the price tag. I would say I would actually put him in the flop category, but that feels harsh given the horrendous injury he suffered. But that is par and parcel, so we're gonna go with that. Last summer, Moussa Diaby, push. Didn't live up to the billing. Had a couple of good spells, but was largely inconsistent and is now leaving. They're making a profit, but you can't call him a success. He's not a flop. He's not a success. He's in the middle. Pau Torres, I think that's a hit. I think he was excellent for them last season. Had a massive part in why they ended up finishing in the top 4. Bournemouth, now, they haven't signed anybody for over 30 million. So we're just going to skip over them. They've made a lot of signings, but they're all in the sort of 10 to 25 million range. No big money gets for them. That's unlikely to change. Recent rumours suggest that they've got 2 targets. One is Dean Huijsen, the Juventus defender, in and around that 25 million mark. Him and Zabarni would be a really, really exciting young pairing that I think could be excellent. Now, it would take time. It would take patience. Very young centre-backs together. Not always a recipe for success, especially when you throw in a very young left-back. They could be looking at a situation where Max Aarons at 24 is by far the oldest defender in their team. So we'll move past Bournemouth. Brentford, nobody. They have not made a signing over 30 million until this summer, which is going to be Igor Thiago, but doesn't qualify for this. So we'll move on. Brighton and Hove Albion. So nobody in the 2022 season, but João Pedro last summer, I think it has to be a success. I think if they made him available tomorrow, they'd easily get 65 to 70 million for him. Very good last season. Big time talent. Believe it was a shade under the 30 million mark, so we're not going to do him. But I think by the end of this coming season, we'll be looking at Carlos Baliba as a success. Up next then, Chelsea Football Club. Burnley last season didn't make any signings over the 30 million mark. Chelsea. Enzo Fernandez. Push. He's been okay. He hasn't lived up to the billing. He's had runs of being good. He hasn't been a flop because he hasn't been bad. But he doesn't look anywhere close to a £100 million player, in part because of how he's been used. I think he's got to hit this season or we're going to have to start looking at him as a bit of a flop. Wesley Fofana, I think you've got to go flop as things currently stand. It feels harsh because he's had a lot of injuries, but it's 2 seasons now. Mikhail Mudryk, undeniably flop. Mark Cucurella, he had a good back half the last season. Before that, he was trash. Flop. Koulibaly, flop. Badiashile, flop. Medeki's done okay. Gusto's been decent. Raheem Sterling, I think you have to say flop over the course of 2 seasons. Moises Caicedo, he was okay. I would be confident he'll live up to what they paid for him. Romeo Lavia didn't play. I mean, just injured all the time. Same with Nkunku. Cole Palmer, undeniably a hit. Nicholas Jackson, a push. Axel Disasi, given how Chelsea fans are demanding that he be sold, I think you've got to say flop. Crystal Palace next. Nobody in that 30 million range, but they are absolutely magnificent in that sort of 15 to 25 million range. Doucouré added to Guehi and Anderson the year before that, and Eze, Wharton this past season. France, I expect to see more of next year. Really good, but no signings in the £30 million range for them. Everton, Amadou Onana. Performance-wise, I would have said a push, but I think they made 18 million in profit. So I think that counts as a success. I think that's a hit. He is the only signing of 30 million or more, because Beto, to go over the 30 million, would need to hit the add-ons, which at the moment he's not going to. But if we won't include them, he goes down as a flop. Fulham. Nobody. Now, João Palhinha was 25 million, and they've made the 30 million profit, so we'll include him and give them a hit. Let's see. Leeds United, only the one season. Jorginho Rutter, can't call him a success. Brendan Aronson, can't call him a success. Don't think either flopped. Both very young, still huge upside with both of them. I'm hopeful that Aronson plays for Leeds in the coming season. I haven't actually checked to see what the situation is with him yet. But overall, I think both have potential, but it would need to be big seasons coming up for them to not drift into that flop market. Then we have Liverpool. Darwin Núñez certainly can't be considered a success, but he did have a good year last year. I would say push. Same with Cody Gakpo, can't be considered a success. Just can't be. But not a flop, because he has had a lot of good games. So Bosley's a push. McAllister's a hit. Gravenberch is a flop. And that's Liverpool. Man City. Haaland. Do we need to send you with that one? No, hit. Calvin Phillips, though, definitely a flop. Gvardiol, hit. Núñez, flop. Doku, push. Kovacic, push. I think that's fair. I expect Doku to end up in the success, in the hit column eventually. We did have one season of Luton, but they didn't sign anybody for over 5 million, so we can move past them. Manchester United. Right. Anthony, flop. Casemiro, flop. Lissandro, that's actually unfair. No, he had a good first season and a bad second season. So as with Zinchenko, we'll put him in the push category. Lisandro Martinez is a push because he's been injured and inconsistent, but he has had some decent runs. Rasmus Højlund is too early to say. Mason Mount, at the moment, it's definitely flop. Onana, I'll put him as a push, but it's definitely leaning more towards flop because United are already scouting for new goalkeepers. So we'll put him as a push, but he's got work to do. Up next then is Newcastle. Isak, hit. Gordon, hit. Botman, hit. Tonali, he just missed a year because he was suspended for gambling. But I would say push. Harvey Barnes was injured a lot last season. I would say push. Tino Livramento, he's definitely going to be a hit. I'm hopeful he's the first choice right back this summer or this season. I think they made a huge mistake selling Yankuba Minta. I really do think they made a massive mistake. on with selling Minta. If they could have had Livramento and Minta as their right flank for the long term, and then you've got Hall and Gordon or Barnes as the left flank, like that would have been quite good. I think they've made a big mistake there, I really do. Anyway, moving on past the Toon, who've done really well. Nottingham Forest, Morgan Gibbs-White, absolutely a hit. Ibrahim Sangaré, I've got to say flop. He couldn't get in the team last year, so it's got to be flop. But still time to turn that around for sure. We had Sheffield United last year. They didn't sign anybody over 30 million. And Southampton the year before, and they didn't either, so we can skip past them. Tottenham, Brennan Johnson, push. Maddison hit. Well, no, Maddison push. Really good start to the year, but questionable form over the back half when he came back for injury. Van de Ven hit. Oro hit. Kulusevski push. Richarlison, I think, flop. Romero hit. Bissouma push. Brilliant start to last year. West Ham, Paqueta hit, but facing a big ban. Scamacca flop. That's Moyes' fault. Agard, I think you've got to put him in the flop category. Ward-Prowse, push. Alvarez hit. Kudus hit. And that brings us to Wolves. Matheus Nunes was a hit for them. He played really well for them and they made a profit on him. Guedes flop, without question. And then Matheus Cunha, I would say, hit without a shadow of a doubt. And there we go. Nice quick run. Back after the break. Right, welcome back. So, given that David Ornstein has said that there is now an agreement in place today for Ricardo Carvalho to go to Arsenal from Bologna, pending a medical, I thought what we'd do for a little bit of nostalgia is we would look at some of the Italian players who've played in the Premier League over the past 32 years. So, Gabriel Ambrosetti, remember him? No, he played for Chelsea between 1999 and 2003. He played 16 games and spent 3 seasons of his 4 years contracted to Chelsea out on loan back in Italy. Marco Ambrosio, he arrived at Chelsea in 2003 from Chievo. Pretty talented goalkeeper, had been very highly regarded earlier in his career, but was 30 years of age when he landed with Chelsea. Played 8 games across half a season and was then loaned out to Grasshoppers, I think, and was then released on a free after 1 year. Lorenzo Amoruso was a good centre-back. He had played for Bari, Fiorentina and Rangers. He arrived at Blackburn in 2003. He was 32 years of age. He'd spent his best years with Rangers. He couldn't cope with the Premier League. He played 18 games, and that was all we saw of him. Alberto Aquilani came to Liverpool from Roma. Very, very talented midfielder who simply couldn't stay fit, had a series of loans, and left Liverpool at a significant loss. Dino Baggio, once brilliant midfielder who played for Torino and Juve, most notably for Parma, then for Lazio. He had a loan spell with Blackburn. At that point, he was also 32, well past his best and unable to cope with the speed of the Premier League. But in his day, a very, very good player. Francesco Baiano came to Derby in 1997 after a pretty good spell with Fiorentina. He did well at Derby. Of these players that were going through, he's the first one who actually did pretty well in England. Good second striker type, quick, good movement, decent finisher, good player. Mario Balotelli, he had 2 spells in England, one with Man City, one with Liverpool. Safe to say the City spell went better. He was a pretty important part of their title-winning season, scoring 13 goals in the league. Also had the assist for the Aguero goal that won them the title. His 3rd season with City was a disaster. That was his 2nd season. The 3rd one was a disaster. He left midway through, went to Milan, had a good 18 months at Milan, and then joined Liverpool under Brendan Rodgers, who had absolutely no clue what he was doing at that point, and Balotelli flopped. Antonio Barreca joined Newcastle in 2018, a left-back who'd been at Torino and Monaco. Joined the Toon on loan, played once in the Premier League, and that was all she wrote. Nicola Berti, really good midfielder in his pomp, played for Parma, Fiorentina, and most notably for Inter Milan, was a vital part of Inter Milan's team through the 90s, played for Italy nearly 40 times, joined Spurs, and as with others that we've talked about, was past his best, couldn't cope with the pace, the league, couldn't stay fit. A very good player, but not in England. Rolando Bianchi, a striker who joined Man City after a really good season with Regina. He'd previously been with Cagliari and Atalanta. He'd never really been a prolific goal scorer, and he certainly wasn't at City. 4 goals in only 19 appearances. Loaned out in the January of his first season and then sold the following summer. Patricio Bilio, I do not remember him. He was a midfielder who played for Crystal Palace in 1998 and played 4 games before going back to Italy. Ivano Bonetti, now he was a very good player, but came to England very late in his career. So he made his debut in 1981 at the age of 17. He didn't come to England until he was 31 in 1995. He played for Brescia, Genoa, Juve, Atalanta, Bologna, Sampdoria, Bologna again, Brescia, and Torino, and then somehow ended up at Grimsby Town. And the most notable part of his time at Grimsby was getting into an argument with his manager and ending up with a broken cheekbone. He then played for Tranmere, went to Crystal Palace, wasn't capable of playing in the Premier League at that point in his career, played twice and went back to Italy to play for Genoa. Fabio Borini, he had a couple of spells. He was with Chelsea, played 4 times for them, went to Swansea on loan, then went back to Italy, bought by Parma, loaned directly to Roma. Roma bought him, did well enough there. Liverpool bought him. It was a pretty significant flop. But he had good loans at Sunderland and then a permanent move to Sunderland. He somehow ended up going to AC Milan off Sunderland, which will tell you where Milan were a few years ago. But he's still playing. He had a good year last year for Sampdoria in Serie B. And I've always liked him. He's a hard-working player, but he didn't do particularly well in England. Marco Barilio, he was a striker who played for Treviso and then Milan, but was mostly loaned out by Milan. Then Genoa, then another spell at Milan where he actually did really well. Then went to Roma. Didn't really work out at Roma. Had loans to Juve, Genoa and West Ham. Played twice on that loan and went back to Italy. Marco Branca, he went on to be the sporting director of Inter Milan, but he'd bounced around Italy for 14 years before landing at Middlesbrough. Had a really good spell there. Played 12 times, scored 9 goals, but didn't stay because he couldn't stay fit. Great when fit, but couldn't stay fit. Benito Carbone, he was a little magician. So Torino, couple of loans, Napoli, Inter, didn't work out at Inter. Landed in 1996 with Sheffield Wednesday and was brilliant for them. Genuinely fantastic. Had a spell at Villa, it wasn't good. Went to Bradford, did pretty well, then had loans at Derby and Middlesbrough. Neither of them were great. But overall, he was absolutely a success in England. Overall, without question, he was a success. Really fun player to watch. For 3 million, him and Di Canio together, really fun. Like, Sheffield Wednesday in the 90s were a fun team to watch. Obviously, that all came to an end at Sheffield Wednesday after Di Canio shoved the referee. But when those two were together there on Wednesday, they were a lot of fun. Cesare Caicedo is currently at Chelsea. Pierluigi Casaraghi, I maintain he would have been a success, but he came to Chelsea at the start of the 98-99 season and suffered a horrific leg break only a handful of games in. Had like 10 operations. I think he tore his cruciate in the whole thing as well. It was horrendous. And it caused his retirement at the age of 31. Such a shame. He'd been really good for Monza, good at Juve, and then really good at Lazio. Good player, but unfortunately injuries killed his Premier League career. Bernardo Corradi of Manchester City. He was 30 when he came over and wasn't good enough to come and play in the Premier League at that point. He'd been good for Chievo and for Lazio and for a season at Parma. But when City bought him, it just didn't work. He scored 3 goals in 25 games, spent his second season out on loan and was then sold to Regina. Carlo Cudicini, absolutely a success, was in England for a long time with Chelsea and then Spurs. The best backup goalkeeper the Premier League has ever seen, without question. Patrick Cutrone played for Wolves from 99 to 2022, although did spend significant portions of that on loan. 14 games, 2 goals, flop. Daniele Diano of Derby County had a loan spell from AC Milan, played twice, was sent back, not good enough. Samuel Dallabona was at Chelsea for quite a while, like 4 or 5 years. Played a fair bit as well, but wasn't up to the calibre of the Premier League. Good squad player. Matteo Darmian was at United for 4 years and somehow has gone on to have a really good career despite having been quite poor at United. Paolo Di Canio, absolutely fantastic. For Wednesday until he pushed the ref, for West Ham, and then he played for Charlton, and I think that was largely forgettable. But he was great for Celtic, great for Sheffield Wednesday, and great for West Ham. Absolutely a success. Roberto Di Matteo was really good for Chelsea. Really, really good. Suffered a couple of nasty injuries there, but a really, really good player. I think a leg break broke his leg, or ended his career as well. Obviously went on to manage Chelsea to win a Champions League, which is one of the more bizarre things that's ever happened. But he was really good. Really, really good. And scored the winner in an FA Cup final. David De Michele came to West Ham in the 2008-2009 season on loan. A striker who scored 4 goals in 30 games. You can figure out how he did. Alessandro Diamante had 2 spells. One with West Ham in 2009. Scored 7 goals in 28 league games. And then had a loan with Watford in 15-16 and played 3 games. So that's how that one went. Andrea De Sena, left back, brought in by Rafa Benitez, one of Rafa's many wastes of money. He is best known for scoring at Old Trafford and then scoring against Real Madrid. And for that, he will always be a hero, but he wasn't very good. And he wasn't very good when he came back and played for Sunderland, or indeed Leyton Orient after that. Emerson Palmieri, currently at West Ham, he's okay. Stefano Iranio, I loved him. He was excellent for Derby back from 97 to 2001. He'd been a really good player for Genoa for a long time. Decent squad player for Milan. Was really good for Derby. And, always a fan. Matteo Ferrari was a good centre-back who couldn't cope with the physicality of the Premier League. during a loan spell with Everton in 2005-2006, played only 8 games. Gianluca Festa was excellent for Middlesbrough in his spell from 07 to 02, then moved on and played for Portsmouth in the lower leagues. He was just a good, solid, proper, rugged Italian defender. Always liked him. Manolo Gabbiadini, striker, joined Southampton from Napoli, had a pretty good second season, a good first half season. So he joined in the January. Good half season, then was pretty much a flop after that. Emmanuel Giaccherini played for Sunderland, came over from Juve, was a squad player there, joined Sunderland, had 2 decent years, went on loan to Bologna, then somehow ended up at Napoli. Capped 29 times by Italy, which is weird because he wasn't that level of player, but he was solid. Stefano Giacchini, I don't remember him at all, played for Coventry in 1999. 3 games, no goals. Wilfred Nonto, currently at Leeds, very talented young player. Gerardo Crabby, I do remember him. He wasn't good in England. He came over to Blackburn in 2001, played 30 times and scored 2 goals and spent a portion of his 3 years there on loan. Yeah, he was a good Serie B player, but not above that. Jorginho, obviously Chelsea, Arsenal. We all know Jorginho. He's been a success. Moise Keane was a disaster for Everton. Luka Kolyoshu played for Burnley last season. He'll be at Burnley again this season, but he's now a championship player because that's where they are. I really like him. I think he's super talented. I really do. I think he's super talented. And I'm excited to see how he looks when he comes back from the injury. Very, very gifted dribbler of the ball. Very, very gifted in that regard. Attilio Lombardo was well past his best when he arrived at Crystal Palace, but was still good from 97 to 99. The Bald Eagle, as he was known. Arturo Lipoli, who came through he was at the Parma Academy. Arsenal nicked him. There was a lot of hype around him. He wasn't very good in English football. Had a spell at Arsenal, a spell at Derby, a spell at Norwich, a spell at Sheffield United, and wasn't particularly good in any of those stops. Massimo Maccarone joined Middlesbrough in 2002, scored 18 goals in 80 league matches for them. Overall, quite the significant flop given they paid a lot of money for it. Federico Macheda, United nicked him from the Lazio Academy. He was vital in helping them win a league title, but actually wasn't good enough for the top flight of English football. Did have a couple of decent spells in the Championship, and then went on and did really well in Greece. He's actually still playing. He's still playing in Turkey, though he was on loan in Greece or Cyprus about a year ago. Roberto Mancini, genius of a football player, came to Leicester on loan at the end of his career, only played 4 games, was a lot of fun to watch, but yeah, didn't come over to really do anything other than, I think, put himself in the shop window for a potential coaching job. Yeah. He was a good player, but he literally came over in the January, played 4 games, took a leave of absence. He said it was personal reasons, that he had family issues, and it turned out he was back in Italy interviewing for jobs. Obviously did well as a manager when he came over to England. Victor Manone was a fairly solid squad goalkeeper for Arsenal and Sunderland. Dario Marcolone, I do not remember him either. 10 games for Blackburn in 1999. 1 goal. Okay. Marco Materazzi, a lot of people forget he played for Everton, and not only played for Everton, but flopped at Everton in the 98-99 season, and then in 2006 was somehow a vital part of Italy winning the World Cup. Vincenzo Montella came to Fulham in 2007 on loan from Roma. It wasn't great. He was past his best at that point. Antonio Nocerino played for West Ham in the 2013-14 season. 10 games on loan from AC Milan, and it wasn't very successful. Angelo Ogbonna has been a really good signing for West Ham. He's left this summer, but a really good Premier League defender. Stefano Okaka had 2 spells in England, a loan with Fulham, which was a disaster, and then a spell at Watford, which was also a disaster. A decent player, like a big, powerful, bustly striker, but not for the Premier League. Danny Osvaldo. Yeah, do you remember him? Came to Southampton from Roma and just wasn't good enough. Daniele Padelli was at Liverpool. Liverpool had signed him from Sampdoria, I want to say, on loan with an option to buy. He played once and they didn't want him, so he went back. But he went on to have a pretty decent career. Was first choice at Torino for a few years. Yeah, had a pretty solid career. He's currently contracted to Udinese. Michele Padovano. He's another one that I really liked when he was in Serie A. A good second level striker, like not your elite level, but a decent mid-table Italian striker. Had a bad injury. Palace bought him off the back of the injury and could never get fit. Played 12 times, scored once. Gabriela Pelete, who Liverpool signed from Banfield in Argentina. He played 3 times in his year at the club, was sold to Boca Juniors, and reappeared in Europe a few years later and was actually really good for Parma, decent for Milan, and won 3 Italian caps. So fair play to him. Alberto Pelosci was at Swansea in 15-16, played 10 times, scored 2 goals. As a striker, that kind of says it all. Christian Panucci, one of the great fullbacks of the game, had a loan at Chelsea in 2000-2001, played 8 times. At that point, his career seemed to be winding down. He'd been good at Genoa, great for Milan, great for Real, had gone to Inter, didn't work out, had a loan at Chelsea that failed, a loan at Monaco that failed, went to Roma, people had written him off, and he ended up having a really good 7 or 8 years at Roma. So fair play to him. Graziano Pelle, another Southampton striker, certainly looked the part, very handsome man. Came in and did well, to be fair, had 2 good seasons in the Premier League with Sampdoria after 2 great seasons with Feyenoord, and then took the cash to go to China. So fair play to him. Alessandro Castone, I liked him. He was a good defender. Came across from Inter when he was very young. He was near like 21, 22 to Newcastle. Had a tough enough start there. Eventually established himself as quite a good fullback. Could play either side. And then went to Everton and had a solid enough run at Everton. Yeah, I like Pistone. Rodrigo Pozzebon. Remember him? I don't either. United nicked him from the International Academy in Brazil. He was Brazilian by birth, but he was Italian by lineage and played for the Italian underage teams, but never became much of anything in truth. Andrea Ranocchia, he came through at Arezzo, joined Genoa, got loaned to Bari, where he was partnered with Bonucci, and those two together were brilliant. Bonucci went to Juve and had an incredible career. Ranocchia went to Inter, and to his credit, he did have a decent career, just not the career he was expected to have. He was the more highly regarded of the him and Bonucci pairing. And while at Inter, he kind of fell out of favour, was loaned to Sampdoria, then got loaned to Hull. To be fair to him, he was all right for Hull, but yeah, more of a Serie A style defender anyway. Fabrizio Ravanelli, one of my favourite strikers of the 90s, he was brilliant for Middlesbrough. Like, absolutely brilliant. He just scored the winner in the Champions League final. No, it was the Equaliser, because they won the game on penalties, I think. Really good player. The white feather, even though his hair was silver. Gray at like 21. He had a really good season. Scored 31 goals in 48 games, but Borough got relegated and lost 2 cup finals, but he was absolute dynamite for them in front of goal. Then he came back to England later with Derby and actually had an okay season and a half with them. Yeah, fair play to him. Loved Ravanelli. Giuseppe Rossi, there was a lot of hype around him. American-born, United had nicked him out of the Parma Academy, was bigged up and up and up, didn't do anything for United, had a poor loan at Newcastle, had terrible luck with his knees. Did have a good spell with Villarreal, and then joined Fiorentina, but could never stay fit. Francesco Zanetti played for Sheffield Wednesday in 98-99. He was a striker that played 5 times and scored once. No. Davide Santon, similar to Pistone, was a young fullback that came from Inter to Newcastle. It's always seemed to struggle a little bit with the culture and the pace of the game, but he was a solid player. He's retired now, which is a shame because he's still only 33. He's been retired for 2 years. Gianluca Scamacca was a flop. Ezekiel Shalotto, I was never a fan. Right back, right midfielder. Brighton brought him in from Sporting. I don't think he was very good for them. Matteo Serini was a goalkeeper that Ipswich signed in 2001 from Sampdoria. He wasn't very good. He was good. He was a good goalkeeper. He just wasn't very good for Ipswich. He was their record transfer fee until they signed Amari Hutchinson. He was signed, I think, to replace Richard Wright. Andrea Zelenzi, God, I forgot about him. Striker brought in from Torino, where he had been really good, joined Nottingham Forest, was an absolute disaster, got loaned out very quickly and was never seen again in English football. Massimo Taibi, United brought him in to replace Peter Schmeichel. It was him and Bosnich. I think they might have bought Bosnich first. Bosnich got hurt. Bosnich signed as a free, got hurt in the summer. They brought in Taibi. He played 4 games and was bitten. It's a disaster. Sandro Tonali is there now. Paolo Tremezzani was at Tottenham in the 98-99 season, played 6 games, so we can make our own conclusions there. Marcelo Trotta was a striker who, you'll have to excuse Molly, she's doing my head in today. Played for Watford, Wickham, Brentford, and Barnsley, all while on loan from Fulham. Was actually in English academies for a few years with with Man City and Fulham. I don't remember much of him. Maybe Brentford fans would have fond memories of him scoring 13 goals in 37 games, or Wickham fans. He did well, actually, on a couple of them loans, so fair play to him. Destiny Udogie is obviously outstanding. Nicola Ventola, Palace just had no luck with these players, signing them all well after they were good. They brought him in on loan from Inter Milan. He had been a really good player, and he would go on to have a good time with Atalanta after that, but it was a disastrous loan by the looks of things. 3 games, 1 goal. Gianluca Vialli was excellent in England for Chelsea. Really good player. Obviously, part of that Juve team, part of that front line with Ravanelli and Del Piero. European Cup winning captain. Had a good spell as a manager with Chelsea as well, and sadly passed away last year. But a tremendous player. Vicario at Spurs now is great. Zaniolo was at Villa last year. He's decent. Zaba Costa had a pretty poor 2-year run with Chelsea. Simone Zaza, who took the worst penalty anyone's ever seen, had an 8-game loan spell with West Ham that was absolutely awful. And then Gianfranco Zola, who's probably the best Italian to play in English football. He was magnificent for Chelsea from 1996 to 2003, and is probably still the best player to ever play for that club. And that concludes our run through the Italians who've played in England. So I'll be back after this quick break. Right, welcome back. So, Pep Guardiola says Ederson's future at Manchester City is uncertain. It does seem like the player wants to leave. Can Al Ittihad find the cash? I'm sure they can. So it wouldn't be a surprise if that one happens. Enzo Maresca said there'll be no problems when Fernandes comes back to the Chelsea team because he has apologised for his racist chant. That could be interesting to monitor. Moussa Diaby is set to seal his £50.4 million move to Al Ittihad. That's actually a slight loss. It's a slight loss for Villa on the player, which is a bit of a surprise, but it's the right move. It is the right move for them. The gossip then. Arsenal are interested in Nico Williams and Mikel Moreno, but face competition from Barcelona for both players. Borussia Dortmund and Juventus, along with Paris Saint-Germain, are keen on Jadon Sancho, but cannot meet United's valuation. United want $40 million for the player. Trent Alexander-Arnold is committed to Liverpool, with the Reds hopeful he will sign a new contract. Manchester City are in talks to sell Jan Kotu to Borussia Dortmund for about $25 million. Very good young right back. I think City might regret that one. Like, they probably will regret selling Pedro Porro. Manchester United have offered just under €40 million for Matthias de Ligt, but Bayern want €50 million. Trevoh Chalobah is understood to have been shocked at being left out of the Chelsea pre-season tour of America and feels he's been forced out of the club. I mean, I'm not being funny, but they've been trying to force him out for a full year now. If his agent isn't sitting him down and saying, look, this club doesn't want you, let's get you somewhere else, then the people around him are failing him. Kieran Trippier is attracting interest from 2 Saudi Arabian clubs, and with 1 year left on his contract is set to leave the Tyneside club. That's a good move for everybody involved. Joelinton says he is happy at Newcastle and believes Bruno Guimaraes is also going to stay. Ivan Toney is prepared to run down his contract if he does not land a big move this summer. That's obvious. Manchester United need to sell Aaron Wan-Bissaka if they want to sign Nazar Mazraoui. I would sell Wan-Bissaka 5 times over to get Mazraoui. He's a much better player. Everton are set to sign Jesper Lindstrom on a loan with an option to buy from Napoli. It's a good player, but he didn't work out at Napoli. Ipswich are preparing a bid for Jack Clarke. That makes a lot of sense. They tried to get Philigen, and after Philigen, the best winger in the Championship was probably Jack Clarke, so that one would make a ton of sense. Getafe will get over £5 million from Mason Greenwood's move from Manchester United to Marseille because of a sell-on clause they negotiated when they took him on loan, because they took him to basically rehabilitate his image and his value because no one else would touch him. Bologna are in contact with Mats Hummels. That's horrendous. Ollie McBurney is set to join Las Palmas. Do they know what they're getting? Plus, he'll melt over there. Rangers captain James Tavernier is in talks with Trabzonspor, who are offering $1 million for the English defender. The Scottish club are also ready to listen to offers for Todd Cantwell. Chelsea have made an initial approach for Philippe Jorgensen, the Danish keeper of Villarreal. And finally, Championship side Derby County are set to sign Sweden goalkeeper Jakob Vidal Zetterstrom, I think, with the Rams agreeing a $1.4 million deal with his club, Djurgården. It's really nice to see Derby being able to actually buy players again and, function as a football club. That's it. That's me for today, folks. Thanks as always. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.